Hello, I'm Sarah Abel and welcome to the Marriage Challenge brought to you by Care for the Family. My guests this episode are Tim and Rachel Hughes, who are going to be talking about coping with change and transition, especially in the early years of a marriage. For those who don't already know them, Tim and Rachel have been married nearly 11 years. Is that right, guys?
That's right, yep.
They have 4 children under, 7 and under.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Tim is the founder of Worship Central. And together as a family, they've just moved recently to Birmingham, where they're leading St. Luke's Church. Yeah. So Tim and Rachel, welcome. Brilliant to have you on the podcast. Now, I should just say to anyone listening that we are meeting at the moment in the middle of a holiday camp. Yeah. So we might hear seagulls, children screaming, cars going past, anything could be happening.
And most of the screaming children will probably
be ours, belong to us. Yeah.
So just in case, we just thought we'd let you know where we are. Anyway, the first question I just want to ask you guys is the question that we ask everyone who comes on our podcast, which is, how did the two of you meet and get together?
Oh, that's a really good question, because actually Tim and I have known each other our whole lives.
Wow.
So our parents are best friends, and Tim's a year older than me. So the story goes that when I was born, Tim's dad came to the hospital to visit my mum and my dad and me as a tiny, tiny baby. And apparently he held me in his arms and he said, "Oh, she'll do for my son, Tim." And so it sounds, like a fairy tale. Tim actually wasn't in the least bit interested in me for many, many years. I did have a hopeless crush on him from about the age of 12. But it took him until we were about 25 to finally see the light and ask me out on that, that drink that I had longed for many, many years. And then after that, I think there was quite a lot of family pressure for Tim. So I think he was waiting, weren't you?
No, it's great. I mean, we laugh at it sort of our parents' arranged marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you did know each other, but then when you actually got married, some people talk about like the first few years of marriage, they're either really easy or a lot of people say that those can be the hardest years as well. What was that like?
Well, I think the initial few years were amazing. I think actually the transition that was most challenging was when kids came, and I was also with my work traveling a lot.
Yeah.
And that kind of collision of travelling, being away, and the full-on intense thing of kids, I think that's when we probably really came up against a few more challenges that we needed to really work through, about boundaries, about expectations. There was a season, wasn't there, where I'd been away a lot and you were pregnant with number 3, and we just got the balance all wrong. And so actually,
we got the balance.
Yeah, well, maybe I got the balance all right.
No, it was.
And so I actually stopped travelling for a whole year just to make sure that, for us, the number one thing is our marriage and the health and well-being of the marriage. And work has to suffer, or you have to feel like, well, got to take a back step, step backwards on that stuff. So be it. Because we, just if that's not working, then it doesn't matter how well your job's going, how well your kids are doing at school. That's so foundational for us.
But I suppose you've got to spot that, haven't you? You've got to see that happening. And what did it take for you to kind of see that was happening and to be able to make that? Rachel saw that quickly.
Oh dear. I think, communication is always the absolute key in all of these things. And so we recognise that one of the signs for us is the fun kind of disappears from our relationship. That's a bit of a warning light for us, that life might be going on, but we laugh a lot together as a couple. And when the laughter has sort of disappeared, we know that we probably need to go and get some quality time. We need to create those spaces to properly chat. I'm not the one that sort of, that sits down on the sofa and cries.
But you'll get busier. You'll get more thrown into emails.
Your sign. You get more frantic.
More busy. I'll sort of lock down emotionally.
And then I have
so Tim
to work
gets
really
annoyed,
hard.
because I'm like a closed book. And so he's like jibing me the whole time. Come on. And then it's just the explosion happens. But actually, that sort of explosion is perhaps not the best reaction, but what happens is it means everything is then up in the air and we can then have a really helpful, constructive
I guess every relationship and every marriage is going to be different, but I think for us, I'd much rather the initial kind of mess and the kind of, but then it actually leads to a really healthy conversation and almost always a constructive pathway out.
And also Tim's had to learn, it makes it sound like I'm terrible at dealing with these, but Tim's also had to learn that in that moment of sort of explosion, everything that comes out of my mouth is not necessarily rational or even truthful. It's just sort of, I'm an external processor, and because I've sort of I've shut myself down for so long, I just need to externally process. And in the early years of marriage, Tim would sort of have this rabbit in the headlights look on his face like, do you really mean all the things that are coming out of your mouth right now? And now I think he understands. And equally, you know, I have to allow Tim to say what he's feeling and respond to that in a way that I think we've learned over the years the language or the tactics that most help the other person to say what they're really feeling. And I think, again, that's really crucial, isn't it, to learn those tactics well.
And I imagine, I mean, having at what stage you had 4 children under the age of
5?
Yeah, we had them all quite close together.
And with Tim travelling and being away and being busy, what kind of pressures and challenges did that create for you too with the...
I think on the practical side, I'm quite a practical person, so I can juggle a lot of things and get a lot of stuff done in a small amount of time. That's not the issue. I think for me, there was a lot going on in terms of my identity, because before Tim and I were married, I used to work in television. I loved to work. But I also desperately wanted to be a mum, and I knew that being a mum and a parent and, you know, doing that with Tim was such a key part of our journey together. But I hadn't quite anticipated how that would affect my sense of identity. And with Tim going off doing this amazing job that he gets to do, which is fabulous, you know, and I love seeing Tim leading worship, leading in lots of other contexts. Absolutely love that. But there was also a part of me that was longing to do something outside of the home. And it was a strange paradox, because I've felt so called to be at home with the children, so called. And I've got friends who model this season in all sorts of different ways, some who work, some who do a mixture. And I just had to be true to what I felt called to, and that was to be at home. But with that came this tension of, I just love to be out there doing a bit of what you're doing. And so we've had to navigate through that. But now we're in a new transition where our youngest is off to nursery school. We're in a new city, new job, and we both feel this strong sense of leading this church together. And so we're in this process of throwing everything up in the air in terms of how life has looked before, saying, okay, how can it look now? How can it look now so that we get to do this together? How can it look so that I perhaps can step into doing more of the things that I feel called to, as well as being a mum?
And I step more into kids and house and things. I mean, I think we've both done a lot together. I mean, I hope to think, you know, I've changed my fair share of nappies and kids, looked after kids. Sure. I think the biggest challenge and the thing we argue about most was Rachel. Her sort of narrative would be, you have no idea how busy I am, looking after all the kids, the exhaustion of that, and also the mundaneness of some of that. You know, of course, children is the greatest gift, but lots of young kids, you know, they need the routine, and that can be. And so she'd look at me, you know, what I'd give to be in a meeting with interesting people, dreaming together. You know, I remember once complaining about having to get on a plane, you know, all that long flights. Like, what I'd give to sit on a plane, 12 hours, silence, fair point. So, you know, you could look at what I was doing and think, you know, you don't know how lucky you've got it. And then I guess I'd be feeling, I'm working so hard, exhausting myself, and I get no appreciation and recognition of that, you know, and I come back and then it's like I have to jump straight into helping the, you know, so
I think it's an age-old argument.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think we've discussed or argued about that for ages. We had lots early on, and then we realised, do you know what? It's a stupid argument, because you're both right and you're both wrong, and it's like it's not going to achieve anything by saying, okay, you're the busiest, Rachel, you know, well done.
Well done, I get the badge.
You get the gold medal. But actually, you're both stretched, you're both exhausted, you've both got to have grace for each other. There are moments where you both need to challenge and say, look, you need to step up a bit more. There's moments where it's like, hey, I can see you've really been working, take a morning off, or whatever. So I think you need grace in it.
Yeah. And now as you're kind of going into this new transition, do you have to be quite deliberate and intentional about working out how you do that together?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I think deliberate is a really important word because we've been having this conversation over the last year of, okay, what's it going to look like? We've got an opportunity here. We could just go forward with the default setting, or we could use this as an opportunity to reassess how life could look. So, you know, we work out who's doing what on what particular day so that nothing is assumed. I think that was the point that we've needed to get to. It's like, let's not make any assumptions about who's going to be where at what point doing what, because the assumption up till this point had been that I would be at home with the children. And Tim obviously had got into the rhythm of knowing that I had the kids covered, and so he could do other things.
Although it had always been collaboration.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I changed a lot of my practice rhythm of work to accommodate, you know, for example, I'd always be back
Yes.
at 5:30, no matter what, to do bath and bed and help, which is, you know, takes time.
Finding a new rhythm.
Yeah.
In it.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who perhaps is, maybe they're earlier on in that stage of the children adapting to marriage, adapting to each other, maybe they're finding it difficult, and they've got different expectations, and they're trying to find agreements, and they're trying to find a way through it. What advice would you give them on, like, how they can do that from your experience?
Well, I think a key thing for us has always been having a few couples who we can chat very honestly with. They could actually be quite good at feeding back, well, I'm hearing Rachel say this, and Tim say, you know, and actually we've observed this. And
actually, Rachel's right.
Yeah. No, you usually would be.
Sometimes.
but I mean, for us, it was safe, and I know perhaps not everyone has that kind of couple, but to have someone almost help us. So I think there are people out there, sometimes it's just sitting down and spilling it all out.
And it's willing to be vulnerable. Yeah. I think we've learned that if you're not vulnerable, you're not going to get anywhere. If you can be courageous enough to be really honest with some safe people, it can be hugely helpful. But it's choosing vulnerability in the first place. I think that that allows that to happen.
So taking the risk and finding the people that you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, on every episode, we set the listener a challenge, something that they can try at home during the month. So have you got a challenge that we could try, something maybe that's helped you guys in your relationship that you would like to set us?
When we first had kids, we fell into this habit of, once we had got through the day and we tucked our precious little bundle up to bed, we would just switch on the TV, grab whatever food was in front of us, and that would be it for the evening. We'd just watch TV all evening. I'd usually fall asleep, and then we'd kind of, you know, crawl up to bed. And we'd just fallen into that habit over months and months, and we realised that we just weren't communicating. That time had been robbed, and we realised that was the only moments that we were going to get to properly talk about our day and how we were doing. And so we decided that during the week, once the kids were in bed, we would sit down and eat together and have a conversation over dinner. And we'd sit at the table. We wouldn't sit in the lounge in front of the TV. We'd sit at the table, we'd just eat and we'd talk. And then if we watched TV afterwards, that was great. So my challenge is to not switch on the TV as soon as the kids are in bed or once you get back from work. To have an hour after work or after the kids are in bed where it's conversation time, whether you're eating or not. No screens for an hour.
No devices.
No devices. No screens. No screens. And then just challenge good conversation in that time.
Excellent. There's one for us all to try. I'll take that one back to David.
Okay.
have a go trying that. Well, that's all we've got time for this episode. Please do join us again next time when we'll be looking at coping with change during middle age in a marriage. That leaves me just to say thank you, Rachel and Tim, so much for joining us and speaking so vulnerably and honestly from your own marriage. So thank you from all of us, from the holiday camp and the Seagulls. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Marriage Challenge podcast. For further information about our courses, resources and events, visit us at www.careforthefamily.org.uk.